My son tried to force me into a nursing home to seize my assets. He didn't know my fortune was in non-transferable government bonds. The digital chime of a new message, sharp and intrusive, echoed through the quiet, elegantly appointed living room, momentarily disturbing the afternoon stillness. Ilara, a woman of 78 years, whose silver hair framed a face etched with the gentle lines of a life lived fully, though not without its sorrows, reached for her tablet. Her fingers, still remarkably nimble despite their age, navigated the screen with practiced ease. Her eyes, still remarkably keen behind her spectacles, scanned the words from her son, Caspian. The message was terse, devoid of warmth, and chillingly direct. Mother Serafina and I have arranged for a health assessment for you next Tuesday at 10 a.m. It's for your own good. We've been discussing options for your future care, and a reputable nursing home seems to be the most sensible solution. We'll pick you up. A tremor, almost imperceptible, ran through Ilara's delicate hands, not of fear, nor even immediate anger. Instead, it was a slow dawning realization, a cold clarity that settled deep within her bones. For years, she had felt the subtle, then not so subtle shifts in her sons' and daughter-in-law's affections, or rather their lack thereof. She had observed their growing impatience, the thinly veiled disdain in their hurried words and averted gazes, their ever-increasing demands camouflaged as needs, and their dwindling gratitude, which had long since faded into an expectation. But this was different. This wasn't just another request for money, another slight disguised as concern for her well-being. This was an outright declaration of their intent to dismiss her, to neatly package her away, to finally completely unravel the threads of her life and lay claim to what they so obviously believed was rightfully theirs. It was a cold, clinical pronouncement of their ultimate design. Ilara's gaze drifted from the cold, glowing screen to the ornate mantelpiece above the fireplace, where a faded photograph of her late husband, Arthur, stood sentinel. Arthur, with his kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he truly laughed, and his booming laugh that once filled these very rooms, had built a life of immense comfort and security for them both, culminating in a substantial fortune that had become Ilara's inheritance. She had always believed that wealth was a tool for happiness, a means to provide for her loved ones, to cushion their falls and propel their ambitions. She had spent decades proving that belief, pouring her resources, her time, and her boundless affection into her son's life, nurturing his ambitions, cushioning his falls, and indulging his family's every whim. Yet, as she stared at the chilling words on the screen, a profound sense of betrayal, of utter abandonment, washed over her. It was a betrayal that transcended mere financial ingratitude. It was a betrayal of the very essence of familial love, of the sacred bond she had always believed existed between a mother and her child. This message was the final brutal cut that severed the last fragile thread of that illusion. She did not respond to the message immediately. There was no desperate phone call, no tearful plea, no outburst of indignant rage. Instead, a peculiar, almost preternatural calm descended upon her. It was the quiet, resolute calm of a woman who had, after years of patient endurance, finally reached her breaking point. The mask of gentle benevolence, which she had worn for so long to accommodate the ever-escalating demands of her family, began to slip, revealing the true face beneath. In its place, a steely resolve, forged in the crucible of countless disappointments and unreciprocated sacrifices, slowly solidified. Ilara set the tablet down on the polished mahogany table with deliberate precision, her movements unhurried, almost serene. She closed her eyes for a moment, picturing Caspian's smug, entitled smile, Serafina's calculating, avaricious gaze. She had given them everything, truly everything she could, and now they wanted to give her nothing but a sterile room in an institution, a quiet place where she would no longer be a perceived impediment to their greed. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Ilara's lips, a smile utterly devoid of humor, hinting at a secret knowledge. They thought they knew her. They thought they knew her fortune, its extent, its vulnerabilities. They thought they had outsmarted her, planning their cold maneuver with such clinical efficiency. But what they didn't know, what they had never bothered to ask, or perhaps had simply dismissed as the ramblings of an old woman, was how deeply she had understood their true nature for years, how clearly she had seen their avarice growing like a creeping vine, and how carefully she had prepared for the day when their insatiable greed would finally consume them entirely. The health assessment was indeed for her own good, but not in the way they imagined. It was the catalyst that would finally set her free, allowing her to reclaim her life from the shadow of their endless demands. To understand Ilara's profound calm in the face of such a brazen betrayal, one needed to delve into the intricate tapestry of her past, a past woven with threads of boundless generosity and quiet, often solitary heartbreak. When Arthur, her beloved husband and steadfast companion for over 50 years, had passed away a decade prior, he had left Ilara not just a widow's crushing grief, but also a substantial legacy. It comprised a diverse portfolio of shrewd investments, several carefully chosen properties, and a significant sum in a variety of financial instruments. Crucially, a large portion of this wealth was held in non-transferable government bonds. Arthur, a man of exceptional foresight and meticulous planning, had always prioritized Ilara's security above all else. He had often spoken of these specific bonds as a safety net, an untouchable and indestructible bulwark designed to provide for her comfort and well-being for the rest of her days, irrespective of any external pressures. He had, with his characteristic dry wit and knowing glint in his eye, even hinted that they might be a useful deterrent against overly ambitious offspring, though Ilara, ever the optimistic mother, had dismissed it as a fond, if slightly dark, joke at the time. She had believed her son was above such base motivations. In the early years following Arthur's death, Ilara had channeled her overwhelming grief into a fervent, almost desperate, desire to secure the happiness and future of her only son, Caspian, and his burgeoning family. Caspian, then in his early 40s, had always possessed a certain charm, a superficial charisma that masked a deeper immaturity, but it was a charm often overshadowed by an underlying sense of entitlement and a distinct lack of financial acumen. He spoke grandly of business ventures that rarely materialized, and always seemed to be just on the cusp of a breakthrough that never came. His wife, Serafina, was the undeniable driving force behind their material aspirations, a woman whose every decision, every social interaction, seemed to be meticulously guided by the pursuit of social status and ever-increasing luxury. She had an insatiable desire for the best, the most exclusive, the most visible symbols of wealth. Ilara's first major act of generosity came swiftly, almost reflexively. Caspian and Serafina were struggling with a crushing mortgage on a large, ostentatious house they had bought to impress, but could barely afford. Their grand ambitions far outstripped their modest, fluctuating income. Ilara, witnessing their thinly veiled distress and listening to their subtle, then not so subtle hints, had not hesitated. She paid off the remaining 3/4 of their mortgage, a sum exceeding $500,000, effectively freeing them from the crushing monthly burden that had plagued them for years. "It's what Arthur would have wanted," she had told them, her voice soft, her heart swelling with the hope that this act of kindness, this immense gift, would forge a deeper, unbreakable bond of love and respect. Caspian had hugged her, somewhat awkwardly, his gaze already drifting, and Serafina had gushed with effusive, almost theatrical thanks. Yet even then Ilara couldn't shake the quiet, unsettling feeling that their relief was tinged not with genuine gratitude, but with a quiet, almost imperceptible expectation that this was merely the first of many such windfalls, a new bottomless well they had just discovered. And indeed it was. The floodgates, once opened, never truly closed. Within a year, Caspian decided his modest, though perfectly functional, sedan was no longer fitting for a man of his rising, in his own mind, stature. He began making casual comments about the inadequacies of his current vehicle, leaving luxury car magazines strategically open on her coffee table. Ilara, observing his longing glances at luxury dealerships and listening to Serafina's complaints about their unsuitable family car, had purchased him a sleek, expensive European sports car, followed shortly by a high-end SUV for Serafina. The total cost approached $250,000, a sum Alara had dismissed as a small price to pay for their contentment, for the glimmer of happiness she saw in their eyes. She recalled the day she handed them the keys, their faces alight with an almost childish glee. Caspian had boasted to his friends about his generous inheritance, subtly implying that his mother was merely the conduit for his late father's legacy, rather than the true benefactor of her own acquired wealth. It stung, but Alara told herself it was a small slight. The grandchildren Leo and Chloe became another significant drain, albeit one Alara initially embraced with open arms and a heart full of grandparental love. Serafina, ever conscious of appearances, insisted they attend the most exclusive private schools in the city, each year's tuition rivaling a small university scholarship. Alara, yearning for the intellectual stimulation she believed her grandchildren deserved, and hoping for more time with them, readily agreed to cover all their educational expenses, from tuition and textbooks to extracurricular activities and lavish school trips abroad. She would often attend their school plays and sports days, sitting alone in the audience watching Caspian and Serafina arrive late, make a brief performative appearance, then whisk the children away with hurried excuses, leaving Alara to make her own quiet way home. Her attempts to bond with her grandchildren often felt forced, their attention constantly diverted by the latest gadgets Alara had undoubtedly purchased for them, at their parents' suggestion of course. Then came the vacations. Lavish globe-trotting escapades to exotic locales, the pristine beaches of the Maldives, the snow-capped peaks of the Swiss Alps, the sun-drenched vineyards of the Tuscan countryside. Each year, Alara would receive a detailed itinerary, usually accompanied by a casual mention that, of course, Granny will be covering the costs, as always. She remembered one particular trip to a five-star resort in the Caribbean, where she found herself largely confined to her opulent suite, a gilded cage, while Caspian and Serafina reveled in the resort's exclusive amenities, occasionally inviting her to a dinner where they barely engaged in conversation, their eyes constantly scanning the room for more interesting company, or their phones for social media updates. She felt like a walking ATM, a silent, elderly purse holder, rather than a cherished family member whose company they genuinely desired. The emptiness of it echoed louder than the resort's steel drum music. Monthly allowances became a standard, unspoken expectation. Caspian claimed his various business ventures were always just on the cusp of a breakthrough, requiring constant infusions of capital, always a new seed fund, a new marketing push. Serafina, meanwhile, needed a steady flow of funds to maintain her designer wardrobe, her exclusive club memberships, and her endless beauty treatments, all essential, she claimed, for their social positioning. Alara provided, month after month, year after year, the sums growing incrementally, always justified by some new necessity or urgent investment opportunity that invariably failed to materialize. Her own modest needs were easily met, leaving a vast surplus that she willingly, even eagerly, poured into their lives, hoping that someday a genuine unbidden expression of love or appreciation would finally emerge, a sign that her efforts were truly seen and valued. But it never truly did. Over time, the veneer of gratitude evaporated entirely, replaced by an entrenched sense of entitlement, so deep it felt like a birthright. Requests turned into demands. Subtle hints became overt expectations, delivered with a tone of impatient irritation if she hesitated even for a moment. Alara found herself increasingly marginalized, her presence tolerated only when a financial transaction was imminent. Family dinners became rare, often canceled at the last minute if something more important came up, usually a social event that excluded her. Her calls went unanswered for days, her visits unwelcomed, unless they involved a new financial transfer. She was no longer Alara, the matriarch, the mother, the grandmother. She was merely the bank, a convenient and seemingly endless source of funds. The sting of this realization grew sharper with each passing year. She recalled a particularly galling incident from just a few months prior. Her 81st birthday had arrived, a milestone she had hoped to celebrate quietly with her family, perhaps a simple tea and cake. Instead, Caspian and Serafina had forgotten, until late in the evening, when a terse text message arrived. "Happy B-Day, Mom. Sorry, crazy busy today. We'll make it up to you. The makeup had been a casual dinner at a ridiculously expensive restaurant of their choosing, during which they spent most of the time on their phones, discussing a new investment property they were eyeing, subtly hinting, then outright stating, that Ilara's financial assistance would be crucial for this next opportunity. Ilara had paid for the dinner, of course, feeling utterly invisible, a mere prop in their self-serving narrative. The disrespect wasn't just financial. It was emotional, personal, eroding her spirit piece by piece. She remembered Serafina openly mocking her choice of modest, comfortable clothing, comparing it unfavorably to her own lavish designer ensembles, often in front of others. She recalled Caspian cutting her off mid-sentence, dismissing her opinions as old-fashioned or out of touch, whenever she dared to offer a perspective contrary to theirs. Her advice, her wisdom, her very presence, seemed to be an inconvenience, a tiresome relic from a past they were eager to shed. She was a silent observer in her own life, watching her family, whom she loved fiercely, become strangers fueled by an insatiable cold greed. Yet, despite the mounting undeniable evidence of their avarice, Ilara clung to a fragile, desperate hope. She told herself that perhaps they were simply young and misguided, that they would eventually mature, that love would triumph over materialism. She recalled Arthur's words about the non-transferable bonds, his foresight, his protective instincts. He had been so wise, so discerning. He had known that some things needed to be protected, even from those you loved, especially from their darker impulses. The truth was, Ilara had known for a long time, in the quiet, reflective moments of her solitude, that her son and daughter-in-law saw her as little more than a living ATM, a hurdle to be cleared before they could fully inherit what they believed was their due. The nursing home proposal, however, was the starkest, most undeniable confirmation of their true intentions. It stripped away all pretense of care or affection. It was a cold, calculated move, a final brutal attempt to seize control of her life and her legacy, to make her disappear quietly. And in that moment, as she stared at the words on the screen, a dormant strength within Ilara stirred. The years of quiet resentment, the accumulated slights, the countless sacrifices, coalesced into a singular, unshakable resolve. The time for hoping for change was over. The time for decisive action had arrived. The morning after receiving Caspian's chilling message, Ilara moved with a quiet, uncharacteristic determination. There were no tears, no wringing of hands, no desperate phone calls seeking counsel. The well of her sorrow had finally run dry, replaced by a cold, clear clarity of purpose. Her first call was to Mr. Henderson, her long-standing financial advisor. Mr. Henderson, a man of discreet integrity and impeccable professionalism, who had managed Arthur's and now Ilara's substantial assets for decades, answered promptly, his voice as calm and steady as ever. "Mr. Henderson," Ilara began, her voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil that had raged within her for years, but instead imbued with an unexpected steeliness, "I need to make some immediate and significant changes to my financial arrangements. Effective immediately, I want all monthly allowances to Caspian and Serafina stopped. This includes the direct deposits to their accounts, their credit card payments, and any funds allocated for their household expenses." Mr. Henderson paused, a slight surprise, a barely perceptible change in his tone, evident even through the phone line. "Mrs. Ilara, are you quite certain? That's a considerable sum they receive monthly. And the mortgage payment on their primary residence, the one you've been covering for the past 7 years." "Yes, Mr. Henderson, quite certain," Ilara affirmed, her voice gaining an almost imperious edge. "That too. All payments related to their properties, including the mortgage and property taxes, are to cease. Furthermore, the lease payments on their 2 luxury vehicles, the European sedan and the SUV, are to be discontinued. Inform the dealership that the agreements are being terminated and the vehicles should be repossessed if the next payment isn't made by them." A longer silence followed, broken only by the soft click of Mr. Henderson's keyboard as he took meticulous notes. He had seen many family disputes over money in his long career, but never such a swift, total financial amputation. And the children's school fees, Mrs. Alara? They're due at the beginning of the next quarter, and you typically pay a year in advance for their private education. No, Alara stated unequivocally, her voice firm, leaving no room for negotiation. No more school fees. No more extracurricular activity payments. No more payments for their summer camps or their lavish trips abroad. Nothing. All financial support for Caspian, Serafina, and their children in any form whatsoever is to be terminated. Immediately. Mr. Henderson, a professional to his core, simply replied, "Understood, Mrs. Alara. I will execute these instructions with immediate effect. Is there anything else you wish to address?" "Yes," Alara continued, her thoughts meticulously organized, her plan unfolding with precision. "I need to revoke any and all powers of attorney that Caspian or Serafina might hold over my financial or medical affairs. Ensure they cannot access any of my accounts, make any decisions on my behalf, or interfere with my assets in any way. I want a complete legal block on their access to anything concerning me." "Consider it done, Mrs. Alara," Mr. Henderson assured her, his voice conveying a deep respect for her decisive action. "I will draft the necessary legal documents and have them sent over for your signature this afternoon. They will be filed with the relevant authorities by the end of the day. This is a very decisive step, Mrs. Alara. Are you prepared for the fallout, the inevitable reaction from them?" "I am, Mr. Henderson," Alara replied, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips, a smile of quiet satisfaction. "More than you know. I have been preparing for this day for a very long time." After concluding the call with her financial advisor, Alara contacted her lawyer, Ms. Davies, a formidable woman with a sharp legal mind and an even sharper wit. The conversation was equally concise, equally direct. Alara instructed her to draft letters formalizing the termination of all financial support and the immediate revocation of powers of attorney, to be sent to Caspian and Serafina via certified mail. Ms. Davies, known for her acute understanding of human nature, immediately grasped the gravity of the situation and its potential for explosive reaction. She also advised Alara on strengthening her personal security, just in case Caspian or Serafina reacted violently or attempted to force their way into her home. Alara assured her that she would take all necessary precautions, calm and prepared for any eventuality. The first ripples of panic in the Caspian household began subtly, then escalated rapidly into a roaring tide. The initial signs were small, almost unnoticeable to Alara, who had disconnected herself from their daily lives, her phone now set to screen their calls automatically. Serafina, attempting to purchase an extravagant new handbag from her favorite boutique, found her credit card declined. She tried another, then another, each met with the same humiliating rejection, the sales assistant's polite smile hardening into a look of suspicion. Her face, usually composed in an expression of carefully cultivated elegance, twisted first into a mask of disbelief, then into pure, unadulterated fury. She called the bank only to be informed, with polite but firm finality, that her supplementary card had been cancelled and that her husband's account showed insufficient funds for her own. A cold knot of dread began to form in her stomach. Caspian, meanwhile, was experiencing his own brand of quiet dread, a growing unease that morphed into outright alarm. His phone began to ring incessantly. His car dealership called, inquiring about the overdue lease payment for his sports car. His personal assistant, whom Alara had been paying for years to manage his chaotic schedule and make him appear more competent than he was, informed him curtly that her last payment had bounced and she would no longer be providing services. Then came the dreaded email from the private school, a stark formal notification that the tuition for Leo and Chloe's upcoming term had not been received and that their enrollment was at severe risk. The carefully constructed edifice of their privileged existence was beginning to crack. Initially, Caspian and Serafina, locked in their bubble of entitlement, dismissed these as technical glitches, temporary hiccups. "Mother must have forgotten to transfer the funds," Serafina muttered. annoyance in her tone, refusing to acknowledge any deeper issue. She's getting old, a bit forgetful. Caspian tried to log into Alara's online banking portal, convinced it was a simple oversight, only to find his access credentials had been revoked entirely. He tried calling her long-standing financial advisor, Mr. Henderson, only to be met with a polite but firm refusal to discuss Alara's private affairs without her explicit written consent. The realization began to dawn, a cold, creeping dread that tightened its grip around their hearts, squeezing the air from their lungs. This wasn't a glitch. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was deliberate. The tap, their seemingly endless source of wealth, had not merely slowed to a trickle. It had been abruptly, irrevocably shut off. The lavish life they had meticulously built, the one they had believed was their birthright, supported by an endless stream of Alara's money, was suddenly teetering precariously on the brink of collapse. They tried calling Alara, but she had wisely screened their calls, letting them go to voicemail, listening to their increasingly frantic messages from a safe distance. Their messages, initially bewildered, quickly turned demanding, then accusatory, then finally pleading, tinged with a raw desperation. Each unanswered call, each ignored text, served only to heighten their panic, to confirm their worst fears. The game, they realized with growing horror, had changed irrevocably, and they had absolutely no idea why or what to do next. The following day, just hours before their planned health assessment charade, Caspian and Serafina, now fully gripped by a desperate, frantic panic, stormed Alara's elegant home. They didn't bother with the doorbell. Caspian, in a fit of impotent rage, used his old key, which he still possessed, and burst through the front door, Serafina hot on his heels, her face a mask of furious indignation. Alara was seated calmly in her living room, precisely where she had been when she received the initial fateful message. A delicate porcelain cup of herbal tea steamed gently beside her on a small antique table, its aroma filling the serene space. She didn't flinch at their sudden, aggressive entry. Her gaze, however, was no longer soft and yielding, no longer veiled by years of suppressed disappointment. It was sharp, clear, and utterly unyielding, piercing them both. "Mother, what in God's name is going on?" Caspian blustered, his face flushed an alarming shade of red with a mixture of anger and raw fear. His voice was shrill, uncharacteristic of his usual self-important cadence. "My credit card was declined. The car dealership called, threatening repossession. The school is threatening to expel Leo and Chloe. What have you done to us?" Serafina, always more theatrical in her distress, collapsed onto the plush sofa, feigning an exaggerated gasp and clutching her chest. "Alara, how could you? Do you know the utter embarrassment this has caused? People are talking, darling. Our reputation, our standing in the community. It's all being ruined. You're destroying us." Alara took a slow, deliberate sip of her tea, her eyes fixed on them both, observing their frantic flailing with a detached calm. "Ruined?" she asked, her voice quiet, almost a whisper, but carrying an unexpected weight, an undeniable authority. "You speak of ruin. Do you know what it feels like to have your life, your very existence, treated as an inconvenience? Do you know what it feels like to be seen only as a source of money, a walking ATM, rather than a mother, a grandmother, a human being with feelings and desires?" Caspian scoffed, momentarily forgetting his panic, his entitlement reasserting itself. "Don't be so dramatic, Mother. We love you. We've always taken care of you. This is ridiculous. You're just confused. Is this about that message? The nursing home? We were trying to help you for your own good, because you're old and clearly not thinking straight." He waved a dismissive hand. "Help me." Alara's voice, though still calm, now held an icy, cutting edge that sent a shiver down their spines. "You were sending me to a nursing home, a place you had already chosen without my consent, under the transparent pretense of a health assessment. You weren't helping me, Caspian. You were trying to dispose of me, to clear the way so you could finally seize what you so obviously believed was my entire fortune, without any bothersome interference from me." Serafina gasped again, her pretense of victimhood momentarily forgotten, replaced by genuine shock. That's not fair. We were just exploring options. You're old, Alara, you need constant care. And frankly, your money needs to be managed properly. You're not capable anymore. Her eyes, sharp and avaricious, darted around the opulent room, as if calculating its worth, already mentally cataloging her future possessions. Managed properly? Alara repeated, a hint of profound disdain entering her tone, her gaze searing them. You mean like the mortgage I paid off for you, which you then immediately proceeded to rack up more debt on, believing it was an endless supply? Or the luxury cars I bought you, which you then totaled and audaciously demanded replacements for? Or the private school fees that bought you prestige and social standing, not genuine education for my grandchildren, who you barely spend time with yourselves? Or the countless lavish vacations, the designer clothes, the endless allowances that never seemed to be enough, always followed by new demands? Her voice rose slightly, but it was still controlled, devastatingly so, each word a carefully aimed dart. For years I poured my heart and my wealth into your lives, hoping for love, for respect, for genuine affection. Instead, I received nothing but incessant demands, an entrenched sense of entitlement, and thinly veiled contempt. I was a purse, not a person. And you, Caspian, my own son, treated me as a burden, a nuisance to be tolerated only until you could finally claim what you felt was yours. Caspian began to pace, his voice rising in desperation, his face contorted. This is insane, Mother. You're being irrational. You're old, you're clearly not thinking straight. Don't you understand what this means for us? We'll lose everything. The house, the cars, the children's school. It will all be gone. You can't do this to us. We're your family. He stopped abruptly, fixing her with a desperate, furious glare. You have a legal and moral obligation to provide for us. You know how much Father left you. And this was it. The moment of truth. The revelation. Alara looked from Caspian's panicked, desperate face to Serafina's calculating eyes, still gleaming with a rapacious greed, even in their fear. She had seen this coming, had known this conversation was inevitable, the final confrontation. And she was utterly ready. Ah, yes, Alara said, her voice now dangerously soft, almost a whisper, yet it commanded their complete, terrified attention. What your father left me. He was a very wise man, Arthur was. Far wiser than you ever gave him credit for. He understood the nature of people, even those closest to him. He understood that true love cannot be bought, and that some inheritances need to be protected from certain appetites, particularly those that know no bounds. She paused, letting the words hang in the air, allowing their fear and confusion to mount, to reach a crescendo. Then she delivered the final, crushing blow, the truth she had guarded for so long. You see, my dears, a significant portion of the fortune your father left me, the portion that truly secures my future and comfort, is held in non-transferable government bonds. What does that mean, you ask? Alara's smile was chilling, devoid of warmth, a cold, triumphant curve of her lips. It means they cannot be sold. They cannot be gifted. They cannot be used as collateral for your fanciful business schemes, or your insatiable desire for luxury. And most importantly, they cannot be inherited or seized by anyone else. Not by you, Caspian. Not by you, Serafina. They are mine and mine alone until the day I die. And even then, they revert directly to the government, or to a pre-designated charitable trust, as per Arthur's specific, legally binding instructions. They were designed, quite brilliantly, to provide for my needs, and to prevent precisely this kind of avarice, this greedy attempt to control and consume. Caspian's jaw dropped, his face slack with utter disbelief. Serafina's face, which had been contorted in a sneer of indignation, went utterly blank, all color draining from her cheeks, then twisted into an expression of profound soul-deep horror. The air crackled with the shattering of their illusions. No, that's impossible. Caspian stammered, his voice losing every ounce of its bravado, replaced by a desperate, childish whine. Father wouldn't. He wouldn't do that to us. He loved us. He would never cut us out. He loved me, Elara corrected him, her voice firm, unwavering. And he ensured my security. The money I have been showering upon you for years, the money for your mortgages, your cars, your schools, your lavish lifestyles, your endless investments, that came from the more liquid assets, the discretionary funds, the portion that I, in my misguided love and desperate hope for your affection, chose to give you. But that well, my dears, has now run dry. And the true fortune, the one you so desperately covet, the one you believed was yours for the taking, is utterly, completely beyond your grasp. It always has been. Elara leaned forward slightly in her armchair, her eyes piercing them both, stripping away their last vestiges of denial. So, you see, there is nothing left for you to take. Nothing to seize. Your plan to put me in a nursing home to plunder my assets was not just cruel, it was utterly, tragically pointless. You have alienated the only person who was willing to give you everything, for absolutely nothing in return. You have consumed yourselves with greed, and now you have nothing. She picked up a remote control from the table and pressed a button. The large television screen on the wall flickered to life, displaying a live feed from the security camera at her front gate. A sleek luxury sedan identical to Caspian's was being hooked up to a tow truck, its wheels lifting from the ground. Then the feed switched to Serafina's high-end SUV, also being expertly hooked up to a second tow truck. The car dealership informed me they would be coming to repossess the vehicles today, since the leases are now null and void, Elara explained, her voice devoid of any emotion, a clinical observation. Consider it a small taste of the consequences of your greed. My decision is final. You will receive no further financial assistance from me, ever. I have revoked all powers of attorney, effective immediately. You are on your own to build your own lives, or to unravel them as you see fit. Caspian stared at the screen, then back at his mother, his face a mask of utter despair, understanding finally dawning in his eyes. Serafina let out a choked, guttural cry, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her, the illusion of her grandeur shattering into a million pieces. Their attempts at manipulation, their threats, their desperate pleas, all shattered against the impenetrable wall of Elara's newfound resolve and the unmovable reality of her secure, non-transferable fortune. The silence in the room was deafening, punctuated only by Serafina's ragged, broken breathing and Caspian's choked gasps. They had played their hand and they had lost everything. Caspian and Serafina stumbled out of Elara's house, not with the triumphant strides of those who had secured their future, but with the broken, desperate gait of individuals whose world had just been irrevocably shattered. The sight of their luxury cars being driven away on tow trucks was a stark, brutal symbol of their new reality, a visual representation of their sudden downfall. The silence between them as they stood on the curb, watching the tow trucks disappear down the tree-lined street, was thick with recrimination, festering blame and raw, debilitating fear. "She's lying," Serafina finally hissed, her voice trembling with impotent rage, refusing to accept the truth. "She has to be lying about those bonds. No one sets up an inheritance like that. She's just trying to punish us." "Why would she lie?" Caspian retorted, his voice raw with despair, a tear tracing a path through the grime on his cheek. "She never lies. And Mr. Henderson, he wouldn't discuss anything with me. She actually did it. She cut us off completely. What are we going to do, Serafina? We have nothing." The weight of their precarious financial situation, long cushioned by Elara's endless generosity, now crashed down upon them with brutal, undeniable force. Without Elara's monthly mortgage payments, their grand house, a symbol of their social standing and the bedrock of their carefully constructed illusion, was immediately at risk. The bank would be calling soon, the foreclosure notices already looming. The children's private school, once a badge of honor, now became a source of profound humiliation. How would they explain to their friends that Leo and Chloe were suddenly attending public school, a notion they had always scoffed at? Their carefully curated image, their entire social facade, built on the shifting sands of Elara's fortune, was disintegrating with terrifying speed. They spent the next few days in a maelstrom of desperate, unanswered calls and frantic futile calculations. Their credit cards, which Alara had always paid without question, were maxed out. Their bank accounts were alarmingly depleted, revealing the true fragility of their income. Caspian's business ventures, which had always relied solely on Alara's cash injections, quickly proved to be hollow shells, crumbling without external capital. Serafina tried to sell some of her designer handbags and jewelry, but the resale value was a mere fraction of what she'd paid, a paltry sum in the face of their mounting debts and spiraling expenses. The lavish lifestyle, the expensive dinners, the exclusive clubs, the designer shopping sprees, all became distant, mocking memories. Their marriage, already strained by their shared avarice, began to crack under the weight of recrimination and blame. Friends, once eager to bask in their reflected affluence, quickly distanced themselves, sensing the shift in their fortunes like sharks sensing blood. The whispers started spreading like wildfire through their social circles. Did you hear about Caspian and Serafina? Lost everything. Apparently, his mother finally cut them off. Said they were just using her. The social pariah status they had always feared, the one they had worked so hard to avoid by flaunting their mother-in-law's money, became their chilling reality. Their children, Leo and Chloe, sensing the drastic shift in their parents' moods and lifestyle, became anxious and withdrawn, confused and hurt by the sudden loss of their accustomed comforts. The private school had indeed expelled them, forcing them into a public school where they struggled to adjust, bewildered by the stark change and their parents' constant, bitter arguments. Meanwhile, Alara began to breathe for the first time in years. The house, once filled with the phantom echoes of her family's demands, their unspoken expectations, now felt truly her own, a sanctuary she had reclaimed. The quiet was no longer lonely. It was profoundly peaceful, a balm to her soul. She called her lifelong friend Beatrice, whom she hadn't seen properly in years, her time always consumed by Caspian and Serafina's manufactured crises and endless needs. Beatrice, Alara said, her voice light, infused with a newfound joy. It's Alara. How would you like to finally take that cruise we always talked about? The one to the Mediterranean, perhaps for a month or two. Beatrice, initially surprised by the sudden call after such a long silence, quickly warmed to the idea, her voice bubbling with delight. Alara darling, I thought you'd never ask. But, what about Caspian and Serafina? Won't they need you, won't they object? Alara chuckled, a genuine joyful sound that hadn't graced her lips in years, a sound of pure unadulterated liberation. They'll be just fine, Beatrice. They're learning to stand on their own 2 feet. And it's high time I learned to stand on mine too. Properly for the first time in decades. She booked the cruise for herself and Beatrice, a luxurious extended voyage she had always dreamed of but never allowed herself, feeling perpetually obligated to save her money for her family's endless demands. She started taking long, leisurely walks in her sprawling garden, rediscovering the pure joy of cultivating her roses, a hobby she had abandoned years ago because Caspian found it boring and Serafina complained about the dirt on her expensive shoes. She hired a personal chef for a few days a week, enjoying healthy, delicious meals without the pressure of catering to anyone else's fickle tastes or enduring their dismissive comments. The first steps into her new life were tentative, but each one filled her with a profound sense of lightness and liberation. The crushing burden of unreciprocated love and endless financial obligation had been lifted, revealing a world of possibilities she had forgotten existed, a future she could finally live for herself. Months turned into a year, then 2, then 3. Alara's life had transformed into something she had only dared to dream of in her most private moments, a symphony of joy and personal fulfillment. The Mediterranean cruise with Beatrice had been just the beginning. She had traveled extensively, visiting world-renowned art galleries in Paris, exploring ancient ruins in Rome, and finding serene tranquility in temples in Kyoto. She wasn't just a tourist. She was a participant, truly experiencing the cultures, taking cooking classes in Tuscany, learning basic phrases in various languages, and engaging meaningfully with locals. Her mind, once dulled by the repetitive cycle of giving and disappointment, was now sharp, curious, and vibrantly alive, constantly seeking new knowledge and experiences. She had reconnected with old friends, forming deeper bonds, and hosted delightful dinner parties in her beautifully maintained home, filled with laughter and genuine conversation. She even joined a local book club, engaging in lively discussions, and a gardening society, sharing her passion for cultivating beauty. Her days were filled with purpose and joy, dictated solely by her own desires and curiosities. She discovered new passions like painting watercolors and spent hours in her sunroom, creating vibrant landscapes that reflected the vibrant new landscape of her life. Her health, too, seemed to flourish, free from the constant stress and emotional drain of her son's demands and Serafina's avarice. Alara was not just surviving. She was thriving, radiant with a newfound independence, peace, and self-worth. Her fortune, secured by Arthur's quiet wisdom and foresight, allowed her to live a life of comfort and adventure, a life truly, authentically her own. Caspian and Serafina's reality, however, was a stark, brutal contrast. The magnificent house, once their pride and joy, had indeed been foreclosed upon. They had been forced to move into a much smaller, rented apartment in a less desirable neighborhood, a constant, humiliating reminder of their downfall. Caspian, unable to sustain his business ventures without his mother's capital, had finally taken a grueling, low-paying job that he despised, working long hours for meager pay, his spirit slowly eroding. Serafina, stripped of her designer clothes, her exclusive memberships, and her carefully curated social circles, found herself isolated, resentful, and constantly struggling. Her desperate attempts to maintain even a semblance of her old lifestyle led to spiraling credit card debt, which they now had to manage on their meager, combined income. Their marriage, stripped bare of its financial convenience, became a battlefield of blame and bitter recrimination. Leo and Chloe, while initially struggling immensely with the jarring transition to public school, had slowly, painfully begun to adapt. They resented their parents' constant bickering and the loss of their former luxuries, but the harsh realities of their new life forced them to become more self-reliant and resilient. They learned the value of hard work, compromise, and genuine connection, something their parents had never truly grasped. The children occasionally called Alara, tentative at first, then more openly seeking her quiet guidance and genuine affection. Alara, with her newfound wisdom and healthy boundaries, extended kindness to them, offering quiet support, a listening ear, and the occasional thoughtful gift that wasn't financial. But she carefully avoided any financial entanglement with their parents, knowing that true growth often came from facing adversity directly. The moral of Alara's story echoed through the quiet, contented halls of her liberated life. It was a testament to the bitter truth that love, true unconditional love, cannot be bought with money, nor can respect be commanded through financial leverage. For years, Alara had tragically mistaken dependence for devotion, believing that her sacrifices and endless generosity would eventually earn her the love and esteem she craved from her son and his family. But their avarice had blinded them, twisting their perception of her into nothing more than a resource to be exploited, a means to an end. Alara had learned that the deepest and most profound acts of loyalty and care are ultimately those we owe to ourselves. It was only when she cut the cords of financial dependency, when she stood firm against their greedy machinations, that she truly found her own freedom, her own self-worth, and her own profound peace. Her fortune, once a tool for their consumption, became the key to her own liberation, allowing her to live a life defined by her own choices, not their demands. It was a poignant reminder that while wealth can certainly provide comfort and opportunity, it is personal integrity, self-respect, and the courage to set boundaries that ultimately define a life of true richness and contentment. And sometimes the most loving, albeit difficult, thing you can do for those who exploit you is to let them fall, to remove the safety net, so they might finally learn to stand on their own. Thank you for joining us on Alara's remarkable journey of resilience and reclaiming her life. Her story is a powerful reminder that even in the face of deep betrayal, strength and freedom can be found within. If you were moved by Alara's triumph over greed and manipulation, We invite you to explore more stories of justice, courage, and unexpected twists right here on our channel. We believe in sharing narratives that inspire, enlighten, and prompt reflection on life's most profound lessons. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss out on our next compelling story. We regularly publish new videos that delve into the complex tapestry of human relationships and the power of personal transformation. Now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a similar act of ingratitude or exploitation from someone you loved? Or perhaps you know someone who had to make a difficult decision like Alara to protect their own well-being and set firm boundaries? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments section below. We read every comment, and your insights are incredibly valuable to our community. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.